talk into this when I'm introducing, or do you want me to talk into this? Okay. Okay, and it's already recording? Okay. So we'll just get started then? Yeah, I think. Okay. Okay, I think we're going to get started. We were waiting on some of the residents, but I think they're going to file in. My name is Allie. I'm one of the speech-language pathologists here in acute care at RUH. And I want to, first of all, thank Anat and Neil for coming and agreeing to present to us and accepting my invitation. They came all the way from California for a workshop this Saturday and agreed to come early to present to you guys and as well to the neurology department tomorrow. I also want to thank Dr. Kurji for opening up this time slot for us so that we were able to do a presentation during this time. And the reason why I asked them to come here was because ABM is something that is extremely personally relevant for me because it has completely changed my son's life. And it was a conversation we had with our pediatrician who told us about it. And she's just making us aware of it and saying, you know, I've read this book, it's amazing. I've seen these changes in kids that I can't really explain. Why don't you look into it? That short little 5-minute conversation completely changed my life and in turn, of course, my son's life because he has just continued to grow and been doing things that we never thought was possible. So I felt as a mom and as a person who works in the healthcare system, I feel very obligated to share this with you guys and invite Anat and Neil to talk about what it is, because a lot of people have never heard of it, and so they're here to tell you all about it. So I am going to invite Dr. Neil Sharp, up to the front to introduce himself and Anat. And thank you guys so much for coming.
Thanks, Allie. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for coming. My name is Neil Sharp. I'm an MD. I trained initially as an MD in England at Cambridge University and Edinburgh University Medical School. And I left medicine shortly after working for about 2 years. I left medicine to become an opera singer. And 15 years ago, I discovered Anat, partly through my singing. But when I felt the work in my own body, I realized it had a very strong neurological basis to it. And my medical training hadn't prepared me for this because at that stage, I trained in the 80s, and brain plasticity was not something that people were talking about. Basically, it was believed that the brain was pretty much finished in early childhood in terms of massive development. So I was very curious. I thought, if somebody's really figured out how to use this stuff, this should be a big part of physical therapy and rehab the world over. As part of my application, I saw some videos of Anat working with children, and the results were so extraordinary. They were beyond what I thought was possible from a medical perspective. But I came to California to initially see if she was genuine, and then to see if I could learn it. And 15 years later, I have the great privilege to work with Anat. We share kids. I've worked with Ali's son, Nash. I worked with him this week. He's doing phenomenally well. And part of my reason for coming and studying and now working with Anat is to help bring this work to a more mainstream audience. The biggest comment we get from parents is they wish they'd found it earlier. So I'm really, I'm thrilled to be able to introduce Anat, who she has an extraordinary background in dance, clinical psychology, statistics, and then she was the protege of a man called Moshe Feldenkrais. She took the work that she learned from all of those people and developed this extraordinary way of not just working with the kids, but also being able to teach people how to then do it, to teach other practitioners how to do it, which is no mean feat. When I came along and I saw what she was doing, and it seemed like magic. But now I know it's real. I knew very early on in my training that she only speaks from a place of really solid experience. It's all very real. And I don't want to waste any more time because you're going to have an absolutely thrilling presentation from my teacher, my friend, Anat.
Thank you guys for being here, and thank you whoever is online watching. Now we present to real people and virtual people. It's a different world. And thank you, Ali, so much for organizing it. Absolutely all the work you put into it. And thank you guys for being in the room. I'm really thrilled to be doing this presentation. As Neil mentioned, it's one thing to do the work, and the first, I don't know, 10, 15 years of me doing this work and figuring it out, my goal was to do the work and figure it out. And of course, help people. I knew what I knew, and then initially, when I worked with Dr. Feldenkrais, I saw things, I sort of knew things were possible and had the feeling for it. And then when I started working with him, I saw things happening. So I knew the possibilities are much greater than we have access. I believe still the possibilities are always greater than we've access. That's the nature of human evolution. But then when I started doing the work and saw all the changes and saw them over and over again and looked to figure out, I always looked at it from the point of view of the brain, because I figured the changes must be happening in the brain. So I'm just going to step into the presentation. And the presentation is transforming NeuroMovement. That's what I call my work. Transforming the lives of children with special needs, a breakthrough approach based on neuroplasticity. In this presentation, can the computer be closer to me? No, I can go closer to this. To show outcomes from our work that often go far beyond what is expected, the prognosis. I know there's a number of pediatricians here, and there are therapists here, and one of the things is what's possible. So that's the first thing. The second, explain how we facilitate such outcomes for the child. So it's not magic, it's not mystery, it's actually science. It's in the forefront of neuroplasticity science, what we're going to talk about today. And we are just in the beginning of discovering possibilities. I believe that this is amazing, but it's the beginning. It's going to go a lot further in the future. Then give you direct experience of neuromovement, so you feel it in yourself, a little bit of experience, and introduce the 9 essentials and the principles of our work. Discuss ways to adopt those principles immediately. I mean, if you understand something, you can start experimenting with it within what you already do, into the process of diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment. And for the parents, I believe there's a few parents and caretakers here, you can adopt it for just daily life and daily interaction with the child. So we're going to show you first a video of Cypress. Cypress was born without a heartbeat, needed 2 rounds of resuscitation, resulting in severe basal ganglia damage and severe cerebral palsy. Neil, would you? Yeah. So his prognosis was very bad. His parents were repeatedly told he would never walk and would never need a power wheelchair. He would never talk or feed himself. Basically, he had a really, really bad outlook. And good reason. I mean, when we got him first, he was very, very limited. We began working with him at 9 months. Actually, Neil gave him his first session, at which time he had very limited movement and had not rolled over. So here's the videotape, and it has music in the background that we can tune down. Anyway, go ahead. That's good. I assume you know what you're looking at, right? I mean, Now watch by what happens to his head position within 2 or 3 repetitions. Leave it alone, Neil. This is during a training. The practitioners, after they finish their basic training, we do more work, how to work with the children. And as therapists and medical people and so on, look at what he's doing, look at what is still not right, like his hands are, all crunched and stuff like that. Uh-oh, we're back. This is people coming on the... this guy has to be told that we are having this again. Ali? People need to be muted, that are coming online. And now they could. Uh-oh. He just said he wants to jump.
All right, beautiful.
That's it. He just started walking independently a couple weeks earlier. Okay. This was cut for the launch of my book, Kids Beyond. So that's, yeah. So now I'm going to move it to the next one. Neil, when you do that, it covers the image. Yeah, okay. So this is now. This is.
If they are, they need to silence it, because that may be.
We cannot have anybody on the webcast in the room. Neil? Yeah? Okay, so we're going to show you just a little clip from the parents' iPhone that we got. Where is he? What is he doing, Neil?
He's climbing over a metal sculpture of a train.
Okay, so just watch what this kid is doing. By the way, he became a non-stop talker. He just talks and talks and talks. Okay. So Cyprus now receives only occasional sessions. He still gets lessons with us, but not nearly as much as he did earlier. His mainstream gets told not to run so much at school, and his peers look to him for wisdom. He's become sort of a leader in his own peer group. And this is him, 2 photos of him. His mother is a hairdresser and very much into clothes and stuff, so he's very much into fashion. He's a really cool kid. And she puts on Facebook some of what he says. So here we go, what this kid is saying. I wait to feel what the rhythm is about, and then I just start dancing. I dreamed that we were making ice cream that makes you want to give hugs. Even today, there's still 1,000 or 1,000,000 or even a jillion people fighting for the right. Thank God he doesn't do everything perfect. You're one of the kindest moms I know, even though you kind of drive me nuts. Before there were books or TV, people would stare at the sky and the stars would tell a story. So before we get into the next slide, the reason Neil and I put this in the beginning of the presentation was to really give a sense of possibility. But give also the sense of the length of time, the progression, right? So we looked in this video, before the clips from now, we looked at roughly just under 2 years. So it's not like he came in and everything, within 1 or 2 or 5 sessions we fixed him. But it was a continuous, deliberate process that allowed his nervous system to figure out how to organize his body, his thinking, and so on. So what is neuromovement? Neuromovement is a systematic approach to communicating with the brain through its primordial language, which is movement, and that awakens the remarkable capacity of the brain to create new connections and new possibilities. I'm going to read it again. It's very dense. Neuromovement is a systematic approach to communicating with the brain through its primordial language, through movement, that awakens the remarkable capacity of the brain to create new connections and new possibilities. That means taking advantage of the amazing neuroplasticity and potentiality for increased and enhanced neuroplasticity. Upgrading the quality of the functioning of the brain itself transforms the field of possibilities, going beyond what would otherwise be available. Again, upgrading the quality of the functioning of the brain itself. That means that the brain itself, as a system, as a live biological system, can function within itself on higher or lower quality or grades, however you want to say it. And to give it a concrete feeling of its reality to people, I ask, have you been like really, have you recently been like really tired? Anybody raise your hand? I think everybody should. Anyway, and when you were really tired, did you find that your thinking wasn't quite as sharp? Raise your hand. And sometimes even trying to figure something really simple or straightforward, and you were kind of a little not there with it, right? This is the quality with which the brain does its job, we'll get to it in a minute, degrades. And part of what we do here, and part of what I realized doing this work over time, is not further than that. I get out of the picture when I do this. Okay. Wow. Okay. So I actually was told, but I didn't think of it. So when I started doing the work, I worked initially mostly with dancers and musicians and orchestras. That was more my background. And then I started working with the kids, and I started doing things, and people, one time I was asked by somebody, that what I was doing looked very much like what they were doing. They said, oh, we do the same thing. And I said to them, I don't think we do, because we're getting very different outcomes. But I question myself, what is it that I'm doing differently? What is the difference? Right? Because you get a child that has a hard time moving. They have 2 legs, they have 2 arms, they have a head, they have a spine, they have a rib cage, whatever. And there's just so much you can do with it. And then you know their age, what they should be able to do by now, so you don't try to go beyond that, at least. And one of the things I realized, the way, it wasn't just what I was doing, but how I was doing it actually gave me a more potent brain that could solve problems that it couldn't solve otherwise. So anyway, next one is the brain's initial formation of capabilities and its initial grasp of cause and effect comes through processing the sensations and experiences resulting from movement. So we operate in a way knowing the complete integration and oneness, in a sense, of the emergence of cognition through the way in which we operate with movement. And then NeuroMovement is implemented in brain-friendly ways. For all the therapists here in the room, it's extremely important that NeuroMovement is implemented in brain-friendly ways. That means harmonious with conditions that drive positive brain change. And it is applicable throughout the life course. That means it's true for any age. We do the work with different ages. So part of what the NeuroMovement is the 9 essentials. I'll just read them quickly, and then we'll go back to them in more detail. Movement with attention, slow, variation, subtlety, enthusiasm, flexible goals, the learning switch, imagination and dream, and awareness. So I'd like to take all of you and have you guys experience a very brief movement lesson. And so you feel, we don't feel our brains, but we can feel the outcome of what our brains do, right? So do the movements gently, no stretching or forcing, very, very important. Slowly, so when you do the movements, just do them very, very gently, go very slowly, go only as far as comfortable. Usually it's actually not very huge. And most of us have lost the sense of real comfort, what that feels like. And pay attention to what you feel as you move. Are you up for that? Yes. Thank you. You're alive. You can talk. Wow, good. Anyway, I know this lecture and it's formal and it's a hospital, but why not have fun anyway? So before you start it, please stand up. And stand up and make sure you're standing behind the chair. By the way, you guys, if you can just come closer, there's something about human distance or connection, and because there's still plenty of seats in here, I'd love to have you closer. I know you're the residents. Come on. Come. Yeah, we'll wait a second. Yes. Absolutely. Everybody that's watching remotely, see if you can stand up and you can find a back of a chair or a desktop or a wall, anything you can use. This will not be good enough. There are chairs. Just be behind the chair. Just move, scoot over, be behind a chair. Yep. That's right. And you guys, you can. Yeah, you see what happens is there's many more chairs. You can stand behind the chairs right now and then sit yourself down after we do the movement lesson. So stand behind the chair. Come on. Stand behind the chair. There we go. You found the back of a chair. There's lots of back of chairs on the top. Here we go. Okay. So it's going to go very fast. It's going to be very short. And what it's going to ask you, so I'm just preparing you a little bit, and is that you're going to be moving back from the chair and turning sideways. I don't know if I told everybody to turn to the left or to the right, but you'll see, and then you'll do the movement. So, Neil, if you can just start it.
Please get up, stand up, turn 30 degrees to your left. Spread your feet comfortably and bend your knees a little bit. And now carefully on your head, not to hit it, bend down with your hands towards your toes, as if you want to touch your toes but do not stretch. And just see how far you go without trying hard, and come back.
Bend the knees a little bit, not
and
straight.
Now turn to face the back of the chair in front of you. Lean on your hands on the back of the chair. And now, round your back, round your spine, pull your belly in and lower your head and eyes to look towards your belly button. And then arch your back, push the belly out, and look up with your head towards the ceiling. And now round your back, pull your belly in.
Do lean on the chair.
And look towards your belly button. And then arch your back.
Lean on the chair also when you arch the back.
With your eyes. And now stand up. Turn 30 degrees towards your left. Bend your knees a little bit and go down with your hands towards the floor and see if it's become a little easier to go down. And come back up. Turn towards the chair. Lean on the back of the chair in front of you. Spread your legs. Bend the knees a little bit. And now pull the belly in and look under your left armpit. Turn your head to look, peek under your left armpit. And then arch your back and look over your left shoulder. Show your tail through the belly. And now pull your belly in and look under your right armpit. And then look over your right shoulder at your right tush. And now, again, look under your left armpit. Round your back, pull your belly in. And then look over your left shoulder. And now stand up. Stand up. Turn 30 degrees to your left. Bend your knees. Spread your feet and go down and see if it's become even easier to go down and if you're going even further. Excellent. And stand up and sit down.
How many of you felt a difference? Raise your hand. Okay. What just happened? Sit down, sit down. There's spaces everywhere. Here we go. Thank you, thank you, thank you for helping out here. All right. So what changed? The way your brain is organizing your movement has changed. That means those few variations of movement, the way you did them, provided your brain with enough information, so actually your brain changed. There is now research that can show it in real time. If I recall correctly, it was actually done out of Jerusalem University in Israel, where the guy figured a way to give tasks and observe the literal growth of new connections in the brain real time, and it's as close to instantaneous as you can think it. It's so rapid, it's really remarkable. Now, those changes do not necessarily last, whether it becomes into learning, but it becomes, that's another question. So, the underlying principles of neuromovement. The brain works as a whole in a dynamic, nonlinear, complex systems fashion. That is actually very, very meaningful when we think in terms of, from my point of view, in terms of both from the medic, and I'm not a medical person, but when we think about prognosis, or even sometimes in terms of diagnosis, but certainly when we look into the question of prognosis, then if we understand and think of the brain and what it means, and we'll get into that, can make a huge difference and big changes sometimes. And for therapists that are doing like the hands-on, literally work trying to change the trajectory of the life of the child and the development of the child, understanding this is extremely important. If we accept the premise that the brain organizes all action, the desirable ones and the undesirable ones, and if we accept the current research findings that the brain is built to change itself throughout life in response to its experience. Again, very important to grasp. The changes are constant. There's so much research that shows it's sort of like a known. It's almost like, okay. But again, it doesn't mean that it will change specific patterns or create new possibilities, but that takes a little more. But the brain all the time responds to its experience. So if we accept that, then an important question to ask is, how can we facilitate for the brain to change in a positive direction? That means intentionally create the conditions that we take advantage of the given quality of the nervous system. That's how it operates. And that is, of course, a pretty new thing from a, evolution of knowledge. It's like infant knowledge. It's like 20, 30 years that has, there were people who understood that. You go all the way to William James. He talked about that, but in terms of really being part of the science, part of the consciousness, and having the ability to measure that, it's a baby knowledge. So we're gonna show you video. Shani, 10-year-old girl, lovely girl, intelligent, with severe scoliosis, severe enough for surgery to have been recommended. And by the way, there are times when surgery is needed for scoliosis. But in this case, it was before the surgery. Otherwise, typically developing lovely child. Here you're going to see a very short portion of a movement lesson. So we worked with her with our hands, where she's like you saw with the cypress, where she's seemingly passive. But here I'm giving her actually verbal instructions. And I'll talk a little bit about this specific movement lesson I'm doing with her and its importance for scoliosis. But anyway, just watch this, just very brief, so you get a feeling for what we do. Make it a little louder.
And if you feel like sliding, bring it like that.
You see, now she already turned with the nose a little more to the ceiling. Anybody who does martial arts, that's a movement you'll be familiar with. There we go.
And slide under the bridge, and go on reverse again. And roll again, maybe to the other side. And come with your hands underneath. Excellent. And good. And this time put your left cheek on the floor. Make sure your elbows are in the air. Excellent. And now, slide this arm under, through like that. And now what you're going to do is you're going to slide the head under, and now you're going to put this hand on the forehead. And very, very gently, you're just going to start rolling that head.
And notice, you see her pelvis is starting to move. And when the pelvis is starting to move, it indicates to me that her nervous system, because in the beginning, she could not do much, that there start to be connectivity, functional connectivity between the head and the pelvis via the spine. And what happens is there starts to be a lot more movement in the rib cage and in the vertebrae. And the twisting movement is a movement that if you took any object and you curved it and you started twisting slowly at the edges, it will start straightening itself. Here we go. So fundamentally, I'm not trying to straighten her spine or not straighten it. I'm trying to facilitate for her to get more freedom in moving in all directions so that her own brain will discover better the midline. And of course, there are structural changes, so it takes a while for the structure to adjust itself beyond what was available before. So here we go. No need for surgery. That was the outcome the mother was hoping for, and Shani. And I found out, the mother says, and by the way, she went from failing to straight A in math. She kept failing in math. And joined the basketball team. So the changes, that's what I said before, the globality of the system. When we work, people come to us for specific issues, pretty much without fail. They report other desired outcomes we didn't even sometimes know they had, or that they had that problem. I didn't know she was failing in math when I worked with her, but her brain, remember I said, upgraded itself in a way that she could also do math better. Anyway, so what did we do with these two children that facilitated such transformation in movement, cognition, and emotional experience of the child? We know that changes need to happen in the brain. That's our assumption. The mechanical model versus the information model. Maybe, yes. So we just show you two little very short clips because they're just cute. You see, this baby is learning the mechanical model of the world. You put objects, you use some amount of force, and you impact the world. We also learn, that's it. No, not yet, not the other one yet. And so we also learn the mechanical model forms in us also actually starts through our own bodies. I don't use much force, my arm doesn't move. I use more force, it moves. I do, they have all these random movements early on, from birth for quite a while. They have a lot of randomized movements, which is terribly important, by the way, for the development to happen. Very, very important. It's not a waste of time. And so things happen and shifts, and they do stuff, and stuff happens. And they learn to associate the sensations of generating force with the muscles to the outcomes that happen. I call it, this is the mechanical model. I'm trying to move an object, it doesn't move, I use more force, it moves. Right? Things like that. So, and then the information model, that's just very brief, it's just, you see, you go, we used it because you take a real person and then you create them virtual through an information system, basically anyway. So the job of the brain is to put order in the disorder and to make sense out of the nonsense. Really sounds simple, terribly important to understand. The job of the brain is to put order in the disorder and make sense out of the nonsense. So when we get stimulation coming in, it's noise. It's just like, it's nothing, and people have had head injuries, or if you're really drunk, or whatever, your brain is not going to do a very, very good job. And the ability to see, the ability to have depth perceptions, many of those things actually are there, the potential, but to really sort it, it's developed. That's why through visual therapy, we can improve people's ability to do things. See, the brain is an information system. It's not a mechanical system. It's a huge jump. It's a continuous jump. It's really important to understand. So if I'm looking at Cypress, and Cypress is not able to erect his spine and stand up, and I agree that it's the brain that's supposed to somehow grow itself to figure out what to do with all those joints and all those muscles so that the outcome is I'm standing up. And if I try to approach it unconsciously, automatically, from a mechanical point of view, that means maybe if I use more force, it'll help it. Maybe if I cut some muscles and release where there's tension, it will help it. Maybe. But maybe there's another way to do it that actually goes to where the system is managed and controlled, and that's the information system. And that's a big transition, and that's why I'm here today. That's what I'm after with all of you, to give more access to the degree that you have, maybe enhance it, and then give some specific tools to do it. What is the source of information for the nervous system? I mean, what's the source of information? Just yell it out. Everybody knows.
Input.
Yeah, but what's the input? Input of what? Senses. So stimulation. Would you say stimulation? That's normally what people would say. Stimulation. Now, stimulation is a necessary but not sufficient condition. Without stimulation, it's over. There's nothing much to talk about. But stimulation by itself is not enough. Again, very, very important to understand. Very important to understand. So what's my next slide? Yeah. You take a child with spastic cerebral palsy. He has some trouble talking, let's say. That's something I found out from one of my clients, that one of the things they suggested to the parents to do is to brush his tongue and stimulate, intensify the stimulation of the tongue as a mechanism to try to somehow awaken his ability to start, talking. If you think of it from the point of view of the brain, what might not be a good idea about that? And this is actually, I'm asking the audience. Anybody's willing to, has an idea that you want to share? Many of you know the homunculus, right? You've learned your neurophysiology and all the neurology and so on. That's the image on the motor cortex and on the sensory cortex that represents the connectivity between the local and functional connectivity between the brain and the different parts of our body. The tongue is bigger than the pelvis and the thighs and the legs. That means that the innervation and connection between the tongue and the brain, when you draw that, the proportional connectivity or surface or mapping, what people call mapping, it is huge. It looks ridiculous. It looks like, you're throwing up a whole tongue out like that. What happens when you intensify the stimulation on the tongue? Because there's plenty of stimulation coming in anyway, but what happens when you intensify it? What happens when you intensify the stimulation of a child with CP or an adult that had stroke? What happens to them? They get more spastic. Would you agree with that? What happens to you if I really intensify the stimulation? What will happen to the tonus of your muscles? It'll go up. You'll get tense. So doing that with the tongue of a child that can't talk, doing it just like that, is probably actually not a good idea, especially if we go to the next slide. Information is the perception of a difference. The way they spoke about it in the neurosciences and in the computer world is you have to have a signal to noise ratio, where the signal relative to the background noise, that means that general activity in the nervous system, is big enough so you notice that something has happened, that you notice it. Does that make sense? Yes, 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 no? So, information is the perception of a difference. So what we need to do, if a difference is not perceived, it does not exist, there is no new information. So I may look at you and I see the color red and the color blue and the color green. But if I don't have the receptors in my eyes or whatever else has happened to me, that I cannot actually perceive the difference, even though the wavelengths are different on my eyes, guess what? I don't see those colors. Now, if you tested me for intelligence, and as a little kid, and you want to see how smart I am, and if I can differentiate colors, and you didn't know that I don't see colors, you'd think that I'm not very smart, right? You'd think I have a problem. So we need to look to create the conditions, if possible, where the nervous system starts perceiving the difference. It's so powerful. that you can now get blind people to see in different parts of their body. So they put the see in quotations because they don't see the way we see, but they have now the mechanism to create differential stimulation in relation to what the image is coming. Do you understand that? What I'm saying here? You can get people to that lose sensation in one part, gain the sensation in that part by getting another part to learn, not just in the brain, but you can also use different parts of the body to replace. Anybody of you is aware of all that stuff? Anyway, people do that. It's very, very, very powerful. And so if a difference is not perceived, it does not exist, there's no new information. Perception of differences leads to differentiation. So first we have the perception of difference, which creates the possibility for us to create new connections, which open the opportunity for integration of new patterns. The brain has no known limit to its potential for continued differentiation. I've worked with some of the world's top musicians while I was still working with musicians. You know, the ones you pay tickets to go to concerts and so on. And they came to me always because they had a problem. They never came to me because they said, oh, I think I could be even better, because they didn't know to look for that. One of the reasons I actually really love and moved to doing this work from psychotherapy, aside that it gives me a lot more tools than just the verbal level, basically, of communication, is that you don't have to have a problem to come and do the work. You can get better. You can learn more. It's really, really exciting. Now, musicians would come to me because of a problem, but when they were done with the problem, their music got better. They actually were able to play more to their own satisfaction. So, we don't know the limit, and we don't have to know the limit. We just have to take advantage of the potential that's there, which allows for increasingly more complex computations. The differentiation increases the complexity of the brain, not complicatedness, but complexity. That means refinement, that means freedom, that means the ability to do things in different ways, which allow the brain progressively to achieve new skills and optimize their quality and subtlety. So that's what you saw that we did with the two examples that we already gave you. What's that? You have to answer me. Anything is true. There's no correct answer. What do you see? Tell me something. I know you're nice people because I'm in Canada.
A dog.
A dog. What else?
Train.
What?
Train.
Train. What else?
Balance.
Balance. Balance is abstract, but fine. What else? Rectangles. Okay. Fine. All accurate. What's that? Disaster. What else? Bigger mess. Very important to know. Learning is a messy affair. Yeah. What's that? What's that? Definitely a duck. I keep saying we need an intermediate thing. So what we're looking here is, this is like a baby that just lies there and has these random movements, and it doesn't know how to control his head, and it's just learning how to gauge and follow with the eyes, and busy nursing, sleeping, digesting, whatever. And then you get a little more stuff, but it's still not defined, right? You start getting differentiation. If you wanted to take those three parts and make it a duck, make it like sitting, or make it like talking, there isn't enough elements. It's too crude. It's undifferentiated. You can't do it. When somebody has a stroke, and one side works, and the other side is like this. And it's one person, so it's not like they couldn't do it. It's just they lost differentiation. So they lost the ability to refine and control and have these continuous, very complex, enormously complex computations in terms of the brain. That's why robots look like robots. They haven't figured yet, they can do it in imagery, but really a robot that moves like that and goes like, oh, hi. Don't know how to do that yet, right? More differentiation, but still not committed. This one should not show like a duck. It should just be more Because you see, you take those pieces, if you make them even smaller, you could take this duck and make a shape of a cat out of it, right? You could make a shape of a house out of it. You could do anything with it that you wanted. I can speak and say any sentence I want. My brain did not learn. I don't have patterns for every word. It just takes those pieces that are close enough to each other, right? We have the vowels, we have this, we have that, and it puts it together. It puts it together. It translates my thinking into words. When we walk, it's not like we have the walking pattern per se, like a robot that's pre-programmed. But we have enough of the configuration that with the intention to move, it pulls itself together, it pulls itself together, it pulls itself together. When you analyze movement, when they've done, it's been done, they show that every movement, even though it looks exactly the same or feels like it's exactly the same, actually there is a difference in the muscles that contract. It keeps changing. So we don't really step the same way over and over again. So there's a duck, video of Spencer, 5 years old, on the autism spectrum. He's still wearing diapers, and there's 2 typos here, and wets his pants. So just to give you a little bit of background, Spencer has been working with us for a while. He had some medical health issues early on in infancy. He was an adopted child. And then his development was delayed, and he started working with us. And then when he got a little older, he was diagnosed as having autism spectrum. And this is his condition. And it's a proper perception of differences. Go ahead. Oh, I have to go, yeah. Can you put it on, stop it for a second? Just, yeah. So I'll just explain to you a little bit my thinking. So here's a boy, he's intelligent, he's very willful, he thinks he's the boss of the world, little guy. I call him my little Napoleon. And and they tried everything. You know, they live in San Diego and they tried everything, you know, and nothing worked. He kept wetting his pants. And he was wearing diapers and pull-ups. And I was thinking, how come he's not potty trained? How come he still wets his pants? So one thought that came through my mind was, you know, he's a very willful little guy, and he gets, plays. He doesn't want to be disrupted, right? So he just wets his pants. He takes care of it. He doesn't have to bother. That could be an element. But the other thing that I questioned was, does he feel the difference around in the area, in his genital area? Does he feel the difference between wet and dry well enough to notice that it's happening? Maybe he is not noticing it, that it's wet the way we all would notice it. So I got permission from his mom, and I have their towel, you know, little washcloths, and I had water that was more or less room temperature. And you'll see what I do. I want to find out. I don't know. I'm going to find out. But in the process of finding out, he's finding out with me. So and the first 2 times that I asked him, is it wet or is it dry, he misidentified. He didn't do it right. And from there on, he did it perfectly afterwards. You'll see. You'll see how it goes. Oh, here we go.
Now, I'm going to touch your leg.
You can't go further forward than this either, otherwise your head gets cut off.
In here.
And one toe is dry and one toe is wet. And you tell me either if you know or if you guess whether it's, this one is dry or wet. What do you think? And this one, what do you think? Is it dry or wet?
He reversed it.
So now, this one, is it dry?
I'm on his face.
And this one.
And he was right.
Dry or wet? Okay. And now, is this one?
Can you pause it for a second? Why do you think so I was on his leg, back of his lower leg, and it didn't work. Then I moved to his face. Why do you think I chose to move to his face? Anybody has a sense, apropos what we just talked earlier about? You're not used to being asked questions during presentations?
More sensitive.
What more?
Face is more sensitive.
That's right. How come? Anybody knows? More
of it. There's more mapping, I guess.
Exactly, a lot more innervation. Hugely more innervation in the face than in the back of the leg. I didn't think about it. I just started in the leg because he was wearing shorts. So I wasn't like deeply into my neurology. It was just that I was doing it, and then when it didn't work, it woke me up. I was like, wait a minute, let's see if we can do it all together, right? So I went to the face, because the face would let me know much better. So go ahead, let's keep watching.
This one, is it wet or dry? And this one, is it dry or wet?
He said wet and dry because the towel touched it. No, he said wet, I mean dry, yeah. It's later, okay.
So now, this one, is it wet?
You see how much faster now?
Okay, and this one, is it wet or dry?
See, that's where he said wet and dry because it touched, the towel touched both in the dry part and the wet part. So he's upgrading the way he does it.
And this one is wet or dry? And this one is dry or wet? Okay, now I'm going to do it a little bit on your tush. Just at the top of your tush, okay? Here we go. So this one, oops. Is it wet or dry? This one is wet or dry? And is it dry or wet? Is it dry or wet? Okay, you have perfect identification. What he needs to wear pants and feel like it's wet and dry.
And then we cut it off here, and he said, no, diapers are good. I want diapers. And basically I told him that no. And he's going to, then I said, you know what is good is when you feel like you need to pee, you're going to go to the bathroom. And that was the last time he wet his pants. That was it, took care of it. He translated it. Now, it doesn't mean if you take a 5-month-old and do this with them, they'll just don't, yeah. The underlying process of learning, discrimination, differentiation, and integration. How we learn, one of 3. Learning requires the following 3 things to happen. Discrimination, noticing the existence of one thing versus another. Thing 1 versus thing 2, as I call my book, such as an infant noticing that this is separate from the rest. If you know, infants in the beginning move all the fingers, they flex them all together, they let go, they flex, they let go. And then at a certain point, but this has some random movement, and they notice, and then they get control, and then they do the pointing, right? It's a very typical thing that children do. Differentiation, exploring the different relationships between multiple thing 1s and thing 2s through movement variations and their associated sensations. The variations of different possibilities leading to the progressive creation of new, more refined and complex functions through the creation of new connections in the brain, which leads to increased density of representational mapping. Integration, spontaneously, again, anybody here who's a therapist or trying to impact what the child can do, very, very, very central and important from my point of view to understand, is that integration is a spontaneous event. Integration, spontaneously pulling together, that means the nervous system pulls together some of the differentiated distinctions at any given time and forming a recognizable new pattern. No one knows when the baby will say mama for the first time. Pretty much all babies, when they are not interrupted in their abilities, do the typical sounds, the da da, all that stuff, whether they're in China, whether they're here, no matter where they are. And from that, they start doing other variations of sounds. And there's a point all of a sudden where they say mama. And if they say it today, tomorrow, yesterday, a month early, a month later, we have no control over it. We can go and say mama, say mama, say mama. If the child is very close to it, it's likely that will accelerate it. But if the child has real trouble doing it, it's most likely to inhibit its ability to do it. It has an opposite effect on the nervous system. And I'll explain some of that because it's true for any function. I'll explain because I see your face and you're like, well, how is that the case? I'll get to that, okay? So very important. We can have a huge impact in the process, huge impact. That's why I'm standing in front of you talking to you here today. We have zero control over the outcome, especially the positive outcome, the creating the new. We can impact more in the negative direction, in limiting people, in traumatizing and creating limitation. But in the positive one, we have zero control on the specific outcome and its timing. How many of you have noticed that your children keep surprising you? You go like, you are mine? Right? Anyway, so Deborah had a pretty serious brachial plexus injury. She was 2 weeks old when she got to us. 8 weeks old. At 1 week old, she started getting therapy in Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. And it didn't work. There was no outcome. They came to a workshop I was teaching in California in our center. And the father is a rabbi, so he talked a lot. And he was very cute. And Neil, if you can stay close to the video in case I want to pause it. No, I shouldn't be in front of it.
Neither in front nor to that.
Because I thought I shouldn't be behind it.
Live in this area.
This is my space. Okay, I figured it out. I thought you told me the opposite. I got closer because I thought I should. I was being so good. Anyway, so a pretty severe left arm birth, brachial plexus injury. So here we go. So this is Deborah in the workshop, and I have a voiceover that I did for that.
Deborah had a severe brachial plexus injury to her left arm at birth and had no movement in that arm. Here I show that already at 8 weeks, her spine is curving with the head leaning more to the right. And as you can see, I'm not touching the left arm. I'm working on her ribs, and then I'm actually working on the right arm, which is the arm that she has movement and awareness of, and playing a little game with her to intensify that even further, with the idea that I can use that later towards the left arm. So I establish the awareness of the movement of the arm on the right side first. I continue working on the ribs and back because I can feel the difference in the back already as a result of the arm injury.
I'm not touching her arm.
She's doing it herself. I'm actually a bit surprised because that started within 6 minutes of the session. And as you can see, the girl is moving a lot more in general and talking to me, of course, baby babble, but talking. And look, the fingers are moving, the arm is moving, the leg on the left side is moving more too. And I'm pointing it to the audience to show them how that works. And here you can see from the side view, the shoulder is participating and all that within 6-7 minutes of the session, which is quite remarkable change for that length of time. I just show you a little bit more of this lesson. Now, in the beginning of the lesson, I kissed her right arm. So here, I start kissing her left arm. Look, she's bringing the arm as far as she can for me to kiss. And I will kiss it long before she does it perfectly. Here, I get her to feel her foot.
That's later, of course.
So the first time. And then simply work on the head, because also the development of the tonus of the muscles and the shape of the skull on the left and right side are a little different. Now look, that's her left arm. That's the baby that couldn't move her left arm at all. Now it's very hard to tell the difference. It's only in the rotation of the wrist that it's still a bit different. But once her brain recognizes there is a representation in the motor sensory cortex of her arm, this will work. So that's a year later. A year?
Yes.
A year later.
I'm so happy to see you coming. Yeah, look at that. I'm going to put all the toys right here. Do you want to play with the toys? Mommy can put you up here and you'll play with the toys. Yes.
I'm getting the hand and how she's moving.
Lily. Yes, here it is. Yes, toys. Where does the do?
She was a challenge. Look at that. Fantastic. Couldn't do better. Okay, so here, yeah. So remember, there is no difference between the right and the left. Actually, in certain ways, the left arm has more movement and so on. They came from LA. They were from LA. They flew back every couple weeks for 3 days, got 6 sessions, flew home for a while. I don't know, we have it on our computer. And then as she could do more, they slowed down the rate at which they came to us. And then I believe that was the last time we saw her. You know, there was no reason to come back. This kind of outcome is possible when we get the child at 2 weeks old. And if we had gotten her at 1 or 2 or 3 days old, it would have happened even faster. So that's that's really important for you guys, because when a child is born with brachial plexus injury, you know it at birth. So the work can start, maybe you can wait a week and everybody settles and so on and make sure everything's okay. But then there's a possibility to start working, which they did in LA, except in LA, they were trying to get her to do the movements that a more developed brain can do with an arm. But a weak-old brain is not supposed to control the movements of the arm. It doesn't do range of motion. It's quite spastic, especially when they're awake. So what do? We'll talk about it in a few minutes. But that's the possibility. We've worked with children with the brachial plexus injury starting at 13 months old with that level of severity and got almost the same amount of outcome. Enough that there was no question of surgery, that there was full use, but not quite as seamless as when you get them right away. Because the brain still doesn't do anything with any arm anyway. And the reason the arm doesn't, in a minute. So that is the importance of understanding that you can communicate with that brain long before the child is supposed to do anything recognizable. Because the child is moving a lot before it's born. It's moving. Once there's life, there's movement. The overlap between medicine and learning, I put that in here. So medicine does not, I don't believe, trains you to work with evolving function. But medicine makes it so that there is the opportunity to function very often. But I'm talking here about the overlap that when we get the access to the brain, get the brain to operate more successfully, very often it also helps with reduced medical symptoms. The children on the autism spectrum, when I started working with them, one after the other, the functioning, but they started eating better. They started sleeping better. I don't work with eating. I don't work with sleeping. This is also not like on the level of that I'm working with learning and the cerebral cortex and all that. So how come that helps? Well, it does. And now there's research that shows that improvement of the general functioning of the nervous system of the brain improves also physiological,
on autonomic nervous system, but markers, physiological markers improve. It's one system, and that's how it shows up. So there is an overlap between the two, and it's, anyway. We have consistently, well, the reason I wanted to say it is for the people who are doctors to understand and have an appreciation the importance and the centrality of the therapeutic work in actually influencing the medical side of things. And of course, that people like me, I have enormous appreciation for the medical people who save the lives and who know to help people in ways that we can then step in and help people learn to use what they have better. Anyway, we have consistently found that when we enhance the ability of the child's brain to perceive differences, it leads to immediate positive change, learning through increased differentiation, refinement, and complexity in the brain. There is spontaneous calming down, dramatically enhanced focus and learning, and the parents frequently report back that the child is much happier. How can we reliably facilitate the brain's ability to perceive differences? So basically in this work, we use movement, and we're going to get into the 9 essentials. We are driving that nervous system to do its own job better. We're driving it to perceive differences, get information, and be good at using it. So the 9 essentials, never mind those 2. The first essential is movement with attention. The attention is to the feeling of self. What we attend to, like I asked you, feel that it's comfortable. Feel. So when I work with children, I train my people, we train our people, but now it's not just me, I have plenty of people working with me. A big part of the training, the practitioner training, is for the practitioners to be able themselves to feel more and facilitate for their clients to begin feeling themselves more. All our development, our intelligence, our growth is based in feeling. We grow up, we become smart, we talk, we do all that stuff, and we dissociate, we don't remember, we don't know anymore that the feeling is the basis for everything. And if you buy into that, just try it out for a few weeks and see how that works for you, then that will dictate a whole lot of what is going to be done or not done as part of therapy. Huge. And it's what the doctor says or doesn't say to the client, to the patients. So movement with attention. Nothing happens until something moves. Einstein. Movement is central, is extremely central, way beyond exercise or just getting the heart rate up or losing weight. I mean, movement is the it of everything. Movement is life. Without movement, life is unthinkable. That's my teacher, Feldenkrais. Jonathan, 21 months old, autism. What's the time now? Yeah, I think if we have time, I'll show it to you, the speed of change in him, but I just want to go through it quickly. Movement is the language of the brain. The non-duality of movement and cognition, you saw it with the girl before, with Shani. Professor Daniel Walpert, Systems and Cognitive Neuroscience, Cambridge University. It's out of a TED Talk. We turned it into very, very short. Listen to what this guy says in his TED Talk.
I'm a neuroscientist. And in neuroscience, we have to deal with many difficult questions about the brain. But I want to start with the easiest question, and the question you really should all ask yourself at some point in your life, because it's a fundamental question if we want to understand brain function. And that is, why do we and other animals have brains? Not all species on our planet have brains, so if you want to know what the brain is for, let's think about why we evolved one. Now, you may reason that we have one to perceive the world or to think. And that's completely wrong. If you think about this question for any length of time, it's blindingly obvious why we have a brain. We have a brain for one reason and one reason only, and that's to produce adaptable and complex movements. There is no other reason to have a brain.
I know, it can be a little disturbing to hear that initially. So, there is a group of research, whatever there is, that in children, it's estimated that 1.8 million new connections are formed per second when the child is in learning mode. That is about 1 billion a minute. Okay? The brain works in very large numbers. Everything is large numbers in the brain, and it's very, very fast. The presenting symptoms and limitations, irrespective of their severity, are not a predictor of the often huge potential for progress for the child with special needs. In other words, you look at a child that has big trouble, it's not a predictor per se of how far it can go. We tend to feel it is, but it's not. Certainly not from my experience. And the very first child I worked with, and over a long period of time, and that's the first chapter in the book, was Elizabeth. She was diagnosed with global brain damage, and later on they found out that she had the cerebellar hypoplasia. She was missing at least a third of her cerebellum. The prognosis was actually pretty accurate given how she was doing. We started with her, she was 13 months old. And they kept coming back, and there was progress, and they stayed with the progress. And I worked with her, of course, over time, less and less frequently, and she needed it less and less. But she walks, talks, has 2 master's degrees, married, and runs her own business, small business. And if you are observant, you can still see a little bit of the tremor that you get with cerebellar issues. But so I learned that. This was my schooling. Elizabeth was my schooling. As long as she did well, we kept working, she kept progressing, she kept working, and she just could do more. She started walking independently 9 years old. Slow. Fast, we can only do what we already know. So just coming back to movement with attention, when you work with a child, or even if you're a pediatrician, putting a child on the table, just the slow will be more relevant. But for therapists, if the child, you either get them to move and or move them, it's so important to move the child in a way that the child will be focused on what they feel as they move. You will get changes, dramatic changes from doing the same thing you did yesterday. You'll get a completely different outcome. If you figure a way to do it and you observe the child and notice if the child is going internal, if they're starting to actually pay attention, notice what they're feeling. And usually they will do it if they like what they feel. If it's unpleasant, they will try to just avoid it. They'll cry. If they feel pain, it'll be more intense, which actually dissociates them, not just not paying attention to what they feel, but they're paying attention to the pain and the discomfort, right? I mean, they're away from what they're doing. They're just trying to escape. And that is a huge transformation. Now, if the child has an issue, medical issue that needs to be taken care of, and it's somewhat painful or uncomfortable, by all means do it. Keep the child alive. But if we're talking about evolution of the child, growth of the child, something that we step in to do, then it's terribly important to know. And many of you and many therapists do that anyway because they feel it. They want to do it that way. But to do it intentionally, for me, if the child was not paying attention to what they felt as they moved, I would back off. I would look for something else, or I would simply stop. Slowing down is very, very powerful. There is the fast forward that Dr. Merzenich developed with the Paula Talal. There's fast, we can only do what we already know. If you know how the brain is built, how the myelination and the creation of patterns and so on, you know that if you go fast, you can only go to what you already know. And if the child had a trauma or adult had a stroke, if you go fast, what you'll get is that the parts that lost connections will simply get spastic. And that's what the brain learns. The brain learns its experience. Another thing to understand, we learn our experience. I speak English with somewhat an Israeli accent. I was raised in Israel. I heard Hebrew. My palate formed to speak Hebrew. My brain formed to make sounds that sound like that. Now, I could go and train myself out of it. I don't think it's important, but that's how it works. We learn our experience. We don't learn what we think we should learn. And we certainly don't learn what somebody else thinks we should learn. So slowing down. Anything you do with anybody and they don't seem to get it, they're not doing, slow way down. Sometimes it's magical. There's no time to go into a lot of examples, but it's very, very powerful. Anytime there's a limitation, back off, slow down. Make sure that there's movement, and make sure that the movement is felt and noticed and paid attention to by the person you're working with. You've seen it. That's where it's very brief. Neil is going to show it. You saw it in the whole thing of you see, I'm getting him, and he still has quite a bit of spasticity in his hips, but I go so slow. You see, he's very attentive. Look at that, the quality of the attention. You see, and then he smiles, the kids get happy, and the brain is built to do it. When we do it, we feel good. Now look what happens here. I put it here. He's still, you see, I get his attention. I move it slow.
You want to do this? Okay. And we go this way. And we, oh, you can hold the ball with your toes. Can you hold the ball with your toes? Look at that. You can hold the ball. Oh my God. Look what
it doesn't show the part where, we took it out. There's a part in there that he went fast and I took the ball away. You see, he sped up. It doesn't show it here. Or maybe it does. Oh, he does it here. You see, I slowed it down. He gets spastic, he gets excited. I back off. I slow him down. It's my job to slow him down. You'll have kids, you'll have to slow down, but you don't force it. You find ways to do it. Okay, I'm going to move on. Subtlety. Subtlety is reduction of effort, force, and intensity. When the intensity, kinesthetic from the muscles and the joints, visual, auditory, when it is intense, it's much harder to notice a change in the intensity. That means, for example, if you go down a street, it's broad daylight, I turned on a flashlight behind you, you won't notice it. We're together in a dark room or a very dimly lit room, I turn on a flashlight, you jump. Same flashlight, same intensity. The difference is that the background, remember, is the signal to noise ratio. So in a dark room, the flashlight is the difference is very big between the flashlight and the dark. But I go into a very lit area, it's not big enough, I don't notice it. So when we reduce the force, when we reduce the intensity of what we do with the other person, we create the conditions, we facilitate for that brain that's already tasked and having a hard time and doesn't know how to put things together and whatnot. We create for that brain the ability to perceive differences. We do it by reducing the intensity. Which, if a child cannot sit up, I won't work on him sitting up or getting him to sit up, because the efforts that that child will have to put in, or if I already pluck him sitting, the difficulty of staying upright inhibits the ability to do any learning, actually. We just pattern that thing. And of course, there's ways to get there, all children don't sit before they sit, and all children don't roll over before they roll over. So how do they get there? By
Hi there, this is Melissa from Yorkton. We've lost sound.
Hello, KCC can't hear either.
I'll keep talking. I know what I'm talking about. So the next one is imagination. Your imagination, when you work with the little ones, and when they start getting older, you can use their imagination big time. Big time. It's very, very powerful. A colleague of mine, Dr. Lat Almagor, I trained her actually, and she worked with a child that used to have enormous, seizures and this and that and CP and all that stuff. And he was a bit older child, very intelligent boy. And she taught him to do certain movements really slowly and delicately and imagine certain things. And he could feel that the seizure is about to come because they have this feeling before. And a lot of the time he could just divert the seizure by doing that. I've never done it with anybody. She used it that way. But your imagination and then awareness is huge. Awareness, the little babies have awareness. They don't have language, but they have awareness, huge awareness. And I say awareness. And how do you get awareness? You don't have to talk. You can talk, but you can, like if you do it and then you do that and the child follows with the eyes and they notice and they make the connections and they become aware of it. And have you ever seen children, like Cypress does it a lot, or did it a lot, they say, I walk back forward, I'm walking backwards, I'm turning around, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. They narrate, they observe themselves, very powerful. Awareness is the glue of learning. It accelerates learning remarkably. So, the learning switch, that all of us and the child is either in a learning mode or not. First of all the essentials that I talked to you about tend to turn on the learning switch. That means the brain is a learning mode. If the child is tired, if the child is frightened, if the child is in pain, if the child is hungry, if the child has already done a lot of a good piece of learning with you in the last 20, 30 minutes, they're not going to learn anymore. The brain doesn't work that way. It has to have a break. It has to get some food. It has to do something different. It can come back. So we can see, how do I know? Well, there's many ways to know, but one way you know is you do something little with a child, the child responds, and the child does their own little thing with it, and then there's a back and forth. It's like dancing. The learning switch is on. And it accelerates for a while, and then it plateaus, and then shortly afterwards, it's always time to stop the session. If the learning switch is not on, don't try to make the child learn. You're just going to exhaust them and exhaust yourself. Take another child, have them go away, come back later, swap, I don't know, it's really work with the reality of the here and now. I know it's hard, we schedule people, but sometimes I say to the parents, I'm really sorry. Your child's not going to learn anything now. Child has a cold, child has a fever, whatever it is. Okay, so we're almost... there's one thing I want to show you that will take tummy time. I use it as an example for the developmental stages. Are there developmental stages? Yes. Are they very strict and precise? No. But roughly speaking, we know. On their back, then they learn to roll on their belly and back, and then whatever, and sitting, and anyway. Tummy time, no time to go into it, but now, I don't know in Canada, but in the United States, now they have lowered the age in which they suggest to put children to practice them a few minutes tummy time every day, age of 1 or 2 weeks old. And parents, and I don't know if you know that, but most babies hate it. They scream, they cry, and how about we notice that if the baby hates it, maybe they have a good reason to hate it. They have many good reasons to hate it. I'm just going to point us a few. So, the case against tummy time based on the understanding of neuroplasticity and the 9 essentials and development in general. Okay, I said that. Most babies hate it. We have a video. We're doing a very short part of that short video, but just to show you.
Babies are quite happy.
Look, you see, cannot activate the back. Make it a little softer, Milo. Cannot activate the back muscles. He can only activate the darn flexors. He feels like he's suffocating. They even put him with the legs over the pillow because he can't arch the back. Does he have a problem? No, he's a healthy baby. And you make the parents think it's okay. Because because I'm going to move on. Why is it so adverse? And all those gadgets to help. The transition from back to the belly is a highly complex and coordinated movement between the eyes, the spine, the pelvis, the arms, and the legs that need to evolve. The extensors of the back need to come online in the brain, which are necessary to be able to lie on the belly and bring the head to vertical. And that does not happen until roughly 4 months old. So tummy time, by definition, if you just read some, facts, is a horrible idea. Now remember, the brain learns its experience. I get kids and I can say, this child had tummy time. I can tell it. And they, usually they come to me because something is not quite right. And the problem is, we don't even know which underlying neural networks we're interfering with the formation that are necessary for what we don't know in the future. That has to do with space perception. That has to do with the vestibular system. That if we're going to show in a second how babies do roll on their belly when they can. And the coordination between the eyes and the change in the vestibular system and all that stuff is enormous. And by the way, when I talk about it to people, both parents and professionals, some of them get really upset. And I go like, what are you upset about? There's all kinds of things that we used to think are great and we realize they're not great and we stop. We used to think the earth is flat. How many of you are going to think it's a really sad thing to think, and let's all of us agree it's flat again, right? So, here's a baby. She's the sister of a child we're working with. And then I'm open it for Q&A. You see, she has the idea, she has the feeling, she wants to, look at something or do something. And she's not upset. She's not succeeding, but she's not upset. She's fine. She's hanging out, right? Yeah. And she takes her time. The mother fixes the shirt as if it's not going to go up again. Yep. There we go. Look, and she takes the head further, but she doesn't know to just lift the leg and do a little bit of weight shifting in space of the top leg, and she'd be up, but she doesn't know that yet. She almost did it, but she's not quite there, and things move, and it's perfectly fine, because while she's failing, quote unquote, boy, is she getting that back to work. And is she getting all other things, and so much happens. Remember those 1.8 million connections per second? We don't even know what's happening, but we know what we take away. We know that we take stuff away when we interfere and try to accelerate it. Okay, next one is the same child, and that's Neil. And Neil is holding the toy a little too far. So something in the coordinating, you see, and then eventually he does with it something that is the right thing, you see. So her whole body is not getting into the action, right? And once she's fixated there with the eyes, she has no idea that everything is sort of stopped. So you don't move, right? Now he brought it back. Poor Neil, I pointed out to the audiences, but he now will do it differently. See, he should have brought it a little lower so she would flex, so the eyes, she would get more of the full trajectory. And now he just leaves it by her. And look, she hasn't rolled on her belly yet. Or maybe she has once at home or something. But this is like the same baby. And the changes happen really fast when they get close. And she doesn't care about rolling over. She just cares about the toy. And here she goes, and now she has to move the head just a little bit more to the center. And here she is. This is invaluable. We want them to not succeed. Show them that until they succeed, until they have enough to generate it. And when people say, oh, my baby rolls, but only from the belly. They don't roll from the belly. They escape. They can't get back. Look at that. Look what it should look like when it's. Look at that arch in the back, the tail up high, the head is vertical. Yeah, that's it. Now, yep. Look at that. Not quite crawling yet. Mother puts him back on the back as per my request. And now I'm coming into the picture because I want to show my students. Too fast for me. But if you put it in slow motion, you will see the magnificence of this movement and how complex it is. It's not just a being on the belly. Now, the baby's a little surprised because I moved it. And look how flexed the baby is. So now they have the flexion, the ability to arch, to extend, and to coordinate from one to the other. It's very, very complex, and it's all the eyes. So here we are. Aha. There you go. And you see here the head does more than the other baby. The other baby didn't know. This baby already knows to flip the head in the better timing. We don't want to accelerate developmental stages. We really don't. And when we work with a child with the tyranny of developmental stages, the parents get so freaked out. They read those books and, Anyway, so it's important if the child is not developing. But when you work with children with special needs, their developmental stages have their own timeline. And those underlying neural networks do have to develop sufficiently to move from point to point. And because the human brain is so big and so dependent on learning, we can get there in many different ways. We're not like a little calf that was dropped and in 10 seconds it's on its feet. It takes us years to develop all those systems. Okay. All right. I just want, slowing down is a good thing. Oh yeah, the fundamental shift, our internal shift that goes with all this that I told you is shifting from fixing to connecting, from trying to fix the child to connecting with the child. And the essentials are incredibly powerful ways both to connect to yourself, because when you apply them to someone else, you're actually doing them, so you're getting them yourself, and to the child. So now I'd like to open it for questions. We have a few minutes for questions. Anybody wants to ask a question? If you're still able to. Yeah, can you just, don't mind going to, oh yeah. What is going to happen is that we're going to, there's going to be a number of those, every row is going to get its own sign-up sheet. If you want to, as you come down, just 1 second, if you like to try, we have an online program with short 5-7 minute movement lessons. We call it NeuroMovement for the Busy Life. It's all in a chair in front of a screen. And if you'd like to do it for yourself, you're welcome to sign up. We'll give you 3 months free, and you can use either some of those movements or the lessons themselves with some of the children you work with, if you want to. Then, if you are interested in finding information about our practitioner training, you can say yes or no. And, of course, there's a newsletter, like we announced this event in our newsletter and so on. So feel free to sign up. And question. Yes, go ahead. A little louder or closer or whatever. Yeah, so why don't you bring her? He's going to bring you a microphone, and then we can. And if anybody thinks they want to ask a question, how about you start coming close to the microphone, okay? If you want to ask a question. Yes, go ahead.
My confusion is with the not rushing it or not interfering. I'm a grandmother, and my granddaughter is doing some language therapy. And just yesterday, my daughter said to me, the language therapist said, do not work with the S's, because you can they'll over make the S that you try and get them to make, and then you'll be causing more trouble for that S formation, because the tongue will get wider and over the teeth and so on. Anyway, it creates more problems than it fixes anything. So, and I also have a grandson who's on the autism spectrum. So, of course, my worry now as I leave this is, when do you know you're interfering and causing more trouble than you're trying to help?
I'll tell you what, instead of coming from a place of fear and concern you're interfering and causing issues, apply the essentials. It's a great, great insurance policy. The essentials, the 9 essentials. To the best of your ability, you'll get better at doing it as you do it. We have videos, we have stuff online, and with these things you can buy. We're going to come out in July with a 5-day parent-child workshop on video and streaming So where we help the parents learn how to use the essentials, but use them. So be proactive. So slow down. Doing a lot of repetitions is a form of forcing. It is a form of forcing. So because you wanted to do it. First of all, if you look at a typically developing child, they do something new and then they go away from it. And they do something else. And sometimes they don't get back to it for 2 weeks. And this is the success stories, right? And so use the essentials. Because when you do, she doesn't say S correctly and you try to make her say it again and again and again and again. I don't know if the tongue widens or not. But you're training her into her failure. And it's you're trying to fix the darn S's. Every time you feel, I'm really going to fix that kid, back off. That's the time to just give them ice cream, scratch your head, and watch TV. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead. We're going to run the microphone. I think we need to turn them on. Yes.
I think people at our remote sites have some questions first, and I'm just scared that the time will end before.
So how do we get the question?
We have a question.
Yeah. Okay. So until we get that question.
We have a question at KCC.
Okay. Hi.
Hi. So we were just wondering, in the past, some kids that have been seeing therapies here have been told that once they start with ABM, that they can no longer see OT, speech, physio. What's kind of the current recommendation on that, and how do you see this approach fitting into other therapies?
Excellent question. I'm glad you're asking that. The reason I have many years ago requested to stop for at least a while doing the traditional therapies is because I found that and again, this is a generalization, but I found that in therapies where they try to get kids to stand up, put them in standers, all that stuff, was really trying to arrive in an outcome in a way that was either very different or contradictory to what you heard the presentation, right? Did you hear the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
So now so let me put it again in proactive. If you do your therapy and you apply the essentials, fundamentally apply the essentials, then by all means, different therapies like the riding the horses, there's different things that are done where the child are not forced and are kind of dancing with where the child is and doing variations and slowing down and all that kind of stuff. We love to we send the kids to many different things because it's very helpful. But if the approach is that if the child is, let's say, 10 months old and they can't sit, but because they're 10, they're being set up in an attempt to make them be able to sit up, by my understanding, it's not very effective, and it could possibly have detrimental effects if you realize that the brain learns its experience. You understand? So if a child, let's say, has cerebral palsy and he's set up and it's 2 pillows and they get all crunched and the lower back is not working, so that's how they do, and they don't know how to transition, I would like to take the time and energy, put them in a position they can be, get them to be more mobile there, learn how to move the head forward, learn how to coordinate the pelvis and the head, learn how to time the legs in that so that they can actually bring the weight forward, arch the back, and sit up. So, and we do that a lot. So that's when I suggest to not combine the two together. But when parents do therapy, I totally support them to continue with the traditional therapy. I just don't feel it has integrity for me to charge money if I think the way it's done, it sort of gives opposing messages to that child's brain. Does that make sense? No? So aside from shaking your head, tell me a little more. Tell me something more.
I've been practicing pediatrics in therapies for 13 years. and I've never been in a position where I was encouraging children to be in a position where they were crunched over, their lower back was unsupported, and we were trying to get them to do activities that they weren't ready for. That isn't something
Excellent. Excellent. If that's your approach, then we're in harmony. It's only the question of your approach. So you are in agreement with me. Yeah, sorry?
I'm Melissa from Yorkton, and
Yes.
I have a question in regards to the mismatch between this method and standing frames. And the
what?
question I ask, and standing frames?
Oh, standing frames, yes.
Is because some of the opportunities that standing frames afford is support to allow for alignment, weight bearing through the hips into the feet, and even though developmentally they may not be in a point where they can do that independently, their musculoskeletal system would continue to develop regardless of whether they were sitting or not. And so in order to best address that musculoskeletal system that's going to keep growing and a potential risk, and looking at them as an overall child, musculoskeletal, neuro, orthopedic, whatever system cardiorespiratory-wise you're looking at, would that not be a useful tool for some of those kids who we know orthopedically are at risk?
First of all, what's your name?
I'm Melissa.
Yeah, you're a little bit out of the picture, but that's okay. I just looking
sorry.
to see you, Melissa. Yeah, if you move to your left a little bit, then I'll see you. Oh, fantastic. Okay. You said a lot of things, and you said also, in what you said, there were also a lot of assumptions. And so to give you a full answer, I probably we'll have to talk about half an hour to 45 minutes, but I will give you some of my answer. Supporting the child, passively the child standing up, could have certain benefits in terms of circulation or so. I'm not saying it does not have any benefits, but most of the children that I know have been put in standards do not bear weight. They don't actually bear weight. Their feet maybe touch the floor. But it's not until they initiate and their own brain has to balance them and make sure that they don't topple over one way or another that the bones actually get pressure. So that, the way I say to parents, and let me put it this way, the hip joints, for example, the formation or the shape of the hip joint happens for the most part long before the child stands up. It starts really happening with the random movements, that create different pressures into the socket. And then the rolling already has a huge amount because it's straight. Anyway, it has a lot of, but definitely crawling is huge, being on all fours and then being like a bear stance and all that stuff. And standing up, they stand up, they already can stand up. There's enough formation there. So it's not the pressure through the feet that develop the hip joints, which is usually one of the areas that there's a big concern. I think you'd agree with me about hip displacement and so on, right?
Right.
It's before they even stand up. It's the movements. It's the correlations in relation to the gravitational force. So in my world, what I say to parents is, it's okay to be in a standard, especially when they're smaller, if we have given up on them learning to do it themselves. Because there is no way the brain can connect between me lying on my back or barely doing whatever to standing up. There is trillions of permutations and connections that happen that allow for this transition over time. So in my world, I'm concerned about the loss of the opportunity for those connections and what I call neural networks to form that create the greater likelihood that that child would end up standing. That's why I say to not do it. Now, if you put the child and support them and put a
so they are not trying to hold themselves when they can't, and put something in front of them so they could play and so on, fine. If you put the child on your body with a thing and you walk with them, there's a, what is it called?
The UPSI.
The UPSI.
5 minutes for Q&A, please.
Okay. Then I would recommend that, but I would bring it dynamic, not a static standard that doesn't, it stop, no movement, no information. So I wouldn't do that. If you look at the child standing, a typically developing child in front of a table, they don't stop moving for 1 second. Okay? I'll leave you with that, and there's another question. Here's a, is there an...
I still have a couple of questions, if that's okay. Yeah, perfect. So thank you very much for the anecdotal stories. I think they're powerful. I was just wondering if there's any scientific peer-reviewed evidence or studies out there.
About ABM?
Yeah.
No. There is a whole lot of, there is a very, very strong support by some of the top neuroscientists, you know, in brain plasticity research, of the principles underlying this work. So in that sense, they did the research on the brain, and they say what you say is accurate, but there is no research directly looking at, you know, taking brachial plexus. I mean, there's a lot of, obviously, anecdotal evidence at this point. And we are working on with a scientist, neuropediatricians for Harvard, to work on stroke research. That's what we're heading to do, is research on stroke.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. My next question just has to do with some of the effects that are seen. And I guess my question goes around, we know that children are growing and developing all the time. And so I just question the leap that all the changes that are seen are directly due to the effects of ABM, or if some of them will happen or occur anyway.
You know, you take a child that doesn't roll over and doesn't talk and doesn't know what they do, and they're already, you know, we have a number of parents here. They're already a year and a half, 2 years old. We kind of know where they are. For them to, and they've had, you know, it's a tough conversation because I'm coming into your world and I'm telling you, hey, change some of what you do, and some of it is pretty substantial. Mm-hmm. So that's not an easy conversation. But then they start doing ABM, they come home. So very, very brief, I had this psychiatrist and the Canadians, lovely, Sarah Beth. She didn't crawl, she didn't this, and a cerebral palsy. After the first visit, she started rolling over. After, you know, and the father says to me at a certain point, he got depressed. And I said to him, what's happening with you? And he said, well, maybe it's spontaneous recovery or misdiagnosis. I said, that's very interesting. It only happens in this room or the week after you come home. And then the wife came and she apologized. She said, he's really depressed. He's a doctor and he can't handle it, that he doesn't know how to help her. You know, so it's very, very understandable. Mm-hmm. But we systematically see, you know, they're here, this happens. They're here, this happens. They're here, the parents go home, they come back, they go, and other things happen. Absolutely. Are we the cause of all the full development? No. Because once the child can do more, so much more happens outside of what we do. But what we do put them enough on the track that more can happen. That's really how I see it.
Perfect. And my last question, sorry, I'm hogging the microphone, is more of a practical question regarding cost. So I was just wondering, in terms of sessions and I don't know what they're
Sweetheart,
called.
I'm not going to go. It's done privately. It's not covered by insurance companies. Okay. We're in the United States. Yeah. And hopefully, anywhere between 10 to 15 years from now, all of us will be using these principles in a very widespread, because my vision is not to keep it in-house. My vision is that all of you can go into your practices this afternoon and just, if you remember 1 or 2 essentials, do what you're going to do and then say, oh, let me just slow down and see what happens. Let me reduce the force and see what happens. It's free for all. I did not invent those principles. This is how it appears that the brain actually optimizes itself. Good conditions for learning. Use it. And let's give this gentleman an opportunity.
And we're not just in the United States. We're over the world now, and there are a lot of people who do get the work covered by insurance. There are actually like 4 practitioners in Saskatoon currently, and there are another 3 about to graduate. So it's definitely worth exploring, because a lot of them charge less than we would charge down in California. But there's a broad spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a special ed teacher and a father of 6 children, all gymnasts.
Wow.
All injured. I take my youngest daughter to see Dan, and she lays down, and Dan says, how are you? She says, I'm broken.
How old is she?
14. That's not my question. That's just a statement.
Well,
So
you say that to me, and it's if I'm just going to go over that?
No.
I mean, it's like a 14-year-old saying, I'm broken, I want to see her now.
Yes.
Yeah.
But my question, my statement is, do you ever get tired of saying the word excellent? I've been following you for 5 years, and you're always saying excellent, excellent. So thank you for that. But I'd just like to tell you...
No, I don't get tired because I see, you see, for me, the miraculousness of life in general, but the ability to learn and change, I go like, oh, you did it, fantastic, excellent. It's not that I don't see the whole picture. Yes. I see what's not there. And I'm very, very intentional and ambitious for outcomes, but I don't go by trying to, I think it's miraculous. People
I think
are
it's
amazing.
miraculous too, and so I just like to give a testimonial. I go to see Dan. I've seen him 10 or 15 times.
For what?
And he keeps telling me to slow down. And I'm a North American male. I played football, I wrestled, and a gymnastics career, 5 generations. I cannot slow down. When I slow down at his sessions, I fall asleep. I got into a car accident. I have neck and back pain. So when I do your CDs with my partner, she goes slow, but I have to go fast to impress myself. The pain finally got so bad, and what I really love about you is when you say, kiss and love your knee, and I can't bend over, and you say, fall in love with your knee, kiss your knee. I can get there, and just this year, I do it every day, and I've finally slowed down.
Bravo.
And halfway through your 20-minute, I can feel the pain go out my body, and thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. So let me just tell